Hey everybody, welcome to another FB Live. Fire your inner critic, find your inner badass, and finally build your business. If you are watching on YouTube, join us in the community of entrepreneurs who are working on mindset mastery, working on building our inner strength for the journey of building a massively successful business. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/fire your inner critic. Okay. So I want to talk for a little bit about how do you strengthen your inner badass and weaken your inner critic. We are used to our inner critics, so let's start there. And we are far more used to our inner critic than we are to our inner badass. We're far more used to the voice of our inner critic. Hey, listen. We're far more used to the voice of our inner critic than we are our inner badass. And your inner critic is pretty freaking powerful because your inner critic has had years of speaking to you in a certain voice, of you hearing that voice, of you succumbing to what it's telling you, of you believing what that voice is saying. The power of your inner critic doesn't come from the fact that it talks or speaks or says certain debilitating things. The power of your inner critic comes from the fact that you believe what it's saying. You remove your belief in what the inner critic is saying, you remove its power. You take away that power and you transform that inner critic into a powerful mentor. Now you've got somebody on your team and not somebody who is not on your team. But the problem for most of us is our inner critic actually didn't begin with us. For most of us, our inner critic actually originated with somebody very early in our lives who said things to us that made us question our ability to succeed, right? We might have had a critical sibling, a critical teacher. Lots of inner critics originate with teachers, I hate to say, because I'm a teacher, and it's sad when you've had a teacher in kindergarten or first grade who belittled you to the point where that developed your own inner critic. Sometimes it's a parent. Right? So our inner critic usually originates from outside of us. Somebody somewhere along the way who said, be careful. I don't know if you can do that. I don't know if you should do that. You're not that good. And lots of people think that criticism is love. So let's get that out there. Lots of people come from the place of, I want to prepare you for life. Life is going to be hard. I want you to play it safe. And so in their desire to protect, they introduce this critical thing that then you took on. And so your inner critic got powerful because it had the validation and the training from people outside of you who are on your team or who you think are on your team. And now you've created that monster inside of you and you're feeding it with your belief. So the question becomes, when you've lived that way for like 20, 30, 40 years, how do you take away the power from the inner critic and weaken it while you also strengthen your inner badass? And here's what I'm going to say. It's simple, but it's not easy. So if you want to strengthen your inner badass, you have to consciously, vigilantly, I'm talking like moment by moment, vigilantly. You need to speak to yourself in a new way, and you need to speak to yourself until you believe it. Like the first 50,000 times you will not believe this voice. You need to create the voice of your inner badass to counter every single thought, feeling, word from your inner critic. You need to create the I can, the I must, and the I will. It's a 3-part dialogue that you're having from your inner badass to your inner critic. The I can, the I must, and the I will. So your inner critic lives on you shouldn't, you can't, you won't. These are typically what your inner critic, you shouldn't, you can't, you won't. You shouldn't do that, you can't do that, you won't be able to do that, or you won't be able to hold that. That's where your inner critic lives. You shouldn't, you can't, you won't. Your inner badass, though, uses totally different language. Your inner badass says, I can, I must, I will. And you want to begin to use that language on yourself. It's not simply, can I build this business? I must build this business. I must take action today. I will get this done. There is a certain force that comes when you turn something from something you should do to something you must do. Tony Robbins put it this way, you get your musts, you don't get your shoulds. People should all over themselves. You don't get your shoulds, you get your musts. So the language that you use on yourself, that you say to yourself about the things you do, from the smallest things. Here's the deal. When you think about brushing your teeth every day is not a should. It's a must. If you don't want your breath to stink, brushing your teeth in your mind is a must. I must get up and brush my teeth. Now, working on your business, you got to ask yourself, is that a should or is that a must? And whatever you need to say to yourself, whatever you need to do, you need to live in the land of I can, I must, I will. Because when you do that, that is giving your inner badass power. It is usurping the power from your inner critic. Now, is your inner critic still going to throw a temper tantrum in your head and rage? Yes. Is your inner critic going to be like, if I just scream loud enough in her head, in his head, eventually she's going to relent? It's no different than a crying child in the middle of a candy aisle at the store. Yeah, they're going to throw a regular temper tantrum because they think eventually they're going to wear you out and you're going to give them that candy. But you got to hold out. And the way you hold out with your inner critic is you focus on your inner badass and you say, I can, I must, I will. That's it. And you give yourself no other option. Now, here's what I'm going to say. In moments of weakness, in moments of doubt, in moments of despair and grief and sadness, you're going to be weaker than in moments of strength and confidence and excitement. And that's where you're really going to be tested. In moments where you go, this sucks shit, whatever you're dealing with. This sucks. You're going to be more prone to listen to your inner critic because you're not mentally strong in that moment. That is the moment where you go, this is going to show me who I really am. That's the moment where you have to remind yourself the challenge isn't when life is good. Challenge isn't when like everything's going your way and the doors are opening and this Red Sea is part. That's not where the test is of your inner badass. Your inner badass is developed in a storm. Your inner badass is developed when your back is against the wall and life is not going your way and you're throwing a regular temper tantrum and your inner critic is going, see, I told you you couldn't do this. I told you wouldn't make it. You should have listened to me. That's where your inner badass gets to grow. So when you hit those moments that are tough, remind yourself, this is where I find out who I really am. This is where I train. This is where I grow my inner badass. This is the moment I've waited my entire life for. Because you know what? You didn't come here for easy. I know lots of people want easy. You did not show up for easy. You showed up for challenging. You showed up for growth. You showed up for power. You will never know your power until you're challenged. Period. You will never know how powerful you are until your back is against the wall and everybody around you is looking like, I don't know if you're going to be able to do this. And then you do what it takes. You do what it takes. That's the true test of your inner badass. Not when things are good, not when things are easy, when things are absolutely fucking hard. And you are like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. That is where your inner badass begins to generate power. And then you just say to yourself, I can, I must, I will. Like there is no options when you make it a must. But as long as you're living in the should, as long as you're living in the shoulda, woulda, coulda, all this nonsense bullshit, your inner critic is going to be way more powerful than you are. It's going to be way more powerful. The only way to get your inner critic to SDASU, sit down and shut up, is for you to say to that inner critic, you know what? I hear you and I've heard you for 20 years and you actually came from my father who was a real hard ass about stuff and he wanted to protect me and so do you and I totally get it, but I want you to sit down and shut up because we're doing this thing. Whether it feels good or not, whether I feel like I can do it or not, it is a must, which means like brushing my teeth, it has to happen. I'm going to make this shit happen. And then you go out and take an action. Tired, you take an action. Exhausted, you take an action. Afraid, you take an action. Courage is developed because fear exists. Because fear exists. It's not, I don't know where people get this whole idea that you can be courageous without fear, or you can be courageous without life storms, or you can be courageous without shit hitting the fan. Your courage lives because your fear exists. Stop making this something that is, why is this happening to me? It is happening for you. Handle it. Handle it. That's how you strengthen your inner badass and weaken your inner critic. Listen, your inner critic came from somebody else. At the end of the day, I want you to remember, your inner critic was born because somebody else was afraid for you. Somebody else was afraid of themselves and their own power. Somebody else did not want to see you expand for whatever reason. Do not allow somebody else's lack of self-belief to become your belief about yourself. Cut that shit out. That's done. They get to believe what they want to believe. You get to believe what you want to believe. Make it a must. Forget about the should. Tell your inner critic to sit down and shut up and say, I can, I will, I must. That's it. No other options. I can, I will, I must. And then get up and take action. The storm is where the warrior in you comes out. The storm is where your inner badass gets strong. The storm is where your inner badass gains its power. It will not gain its power if you're not in a storm. So when the storms show up, just like as sucky as it is, you just say to the storm, bring it. I've been waiting all day for you, because like this is where I get to find out who I really am and do the damn thing. That's how you do it. All right, everybody. If you're on YouTube, join the group, facebook.com/groups/fire your inner critic. I'll see you guys later.